And here we have the illustrious tungsten cube. Aren't those things like really heavy? Right you are, my boy!
For me, it's always gonna be Honda. Always. Honda has this unique way of presenting not exactly exciting cars, but making them fun. And that can be said for the same for the CRZ. The CRZ, Compact Renaissance Zero as it was monikered when it was first introduced, was supposed to be Honda's way of making hybrids fun. I don't know why people like to make things fun. Just make the damn car.
Get away from me!
But the reality is that between 2010 and 2016, the CRZ didn't exactly do well. And in today's video, I wanted to explore that. What's up, guys? My name is Chris, and welcome to The Breakdown, where we talk about everything cars, news, and reviews, I think. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. So the CRZ, as I love to think about from time to time, is almost a distant memory in automotive history. For many of us, we don't even remember any launch materials. We don't remember anything about the CRZ except that it was Honda's weird 3-door product that nobody bought. And in this video, I not only wanted to talk about the CRZ in its capacity, but whether or not it was a flop or if it just was bad timing. And the secret sauce is that it's a little bit of both. So with that being said, stick around and stay tuned because you are now watching The Breakdown. Before we get started, this video has been brought to you by LastFit.com. If you're somebody like me who likes to trade your car in all the time, it's not exactly financially wise, but what is financially wise is changing the look of your car with a relatively decent amount of pizzazz. And LastFit does that. With a vast array of headlight options to choose from, it is a great option for somebody who is looking to change the look of their car without a huge budget increase. And right now they're running a promo of 20% off using the code HWL20. And this is a great time because normally they don't run promotions like this. And so if you are looking for a new set of headlights, this might just be the opportunity for you. So click on the link in the description below to get started on buying your next set of headlights and improving the look of your hoopty today. With that being said, let's get into the video. So the thing is, for the CRZ, it was never supposed to be a volume seller. It's always been niche. And the reality is that whenever you have a niche looking car or a niche style car, it's always going to be hard to appeal to the masses. But let's take it back a bit before I get started. Back in the 1980s, there was this very special car called the CRX. The CRX was a front wheel drive funky 3-door hatchback, a little bulbous, but nonetheless, it was supposed to be affordable fun. Now, it ran on a very small engine and it was front wheel drive, but for many people, it was just enough. And that's what the CRX represented during that time. Running from 1983 to 1991, it was a very special moment in Honda's time. The only thing that I can think of that was remotely even quirkier than that was the Honda Civic wagon. Between 1991 and 2007, there was a huge gap for unique fun Hondas. Now, of course, we had the Civic Si, which was always a big deal. We had the Acura NSX, which none of us were going to touch. And we also had the coveted Honda S2000, as well as the Acura Integra Type R. And all of those cars were enthusiast focused, but none of them were either affordable or attainable. The 90s was a golden period for Honda, as well as the early 2000s, but some things had to change and get shaken up. During 2007 is when they introduced the Compact Renaissance Zero concept. Now, when this debuted at the Tokyo Auto Show, the people were very intrigued because it was a different powertrain and it was a different styling for Honda. And this was right before the housing crisis of 2008. So this was a period where Honda was really going to go forward, as they had just launched the Insight, the Honda Civic Hybrid, roughly between 1999 and 2002. So there was some opportunity for hybrids as it was. Now, I'm not gonna hold y'all, I don't exactly like hybrids per se, but this was a very interesting proposition from Honda, as they wanted to make something fun yet efficient. And this was a hail back to the CRX. Now, towards 2010 is when we would get the launch of the CRZ. As I said before, the CRZ stands for Compact Renaissance Zero, and it was supposed to be Honda's representation of what fun and efficient could be. This ran on a 1.5 integrated motor assist engine with a CVT, and even more special, you could get this as a manual transmission. Now, manual transmissions and hybrids were not a thing, but Honda made it possible. As the horsepower was rated at 122, you could get it going towards the front wheels, and it wasn't fast, but it was fun. A lot of people who have driven them said they've absolutely love them. I ain't never drove that but considerably, it filled a gap where Honda was missing a point of fun and missing the enthusiast spirit. At that time, much of the enthusiast cars, like the S2000 and like the Acura Integra Type R, had pretty much gone. So we didn't have too many more fun Hondas. We did have the Honda Accord Coupe V6, but let's be honest, that was more of a touring car, not necessarily a fun, affordable, practical car. Now, in terms of styling and packaging, the CRZ was different. And the reason why it was different was because it threw a lot of the elements that was once in the CRX into a new modernized, more efficient style. And I hate that word efficient because it's a little redundant. But the thing is that even though it was quirkily styled, it represented fun, practical, and affordable. It was all of those things. Now, it came in 3 different trims, which was the base, the EX, and the EX with navigation. Y'all remember when navigation was a thing? We don't even use them shits no more. But at the time, the interior was incredibly handsomely styled, and it was, for all intents and purposes, everything that Honda wanted. Now, coming off of the rails of 2008, this was a big deal for Honda because gas prices was through the roof, babes. So everybody gather around. There's this meme going around Twitter, basically like, remember when? And let me tell y'all, 2008, I remember you couldn't even get gas for less than $3. And there was a time when gas was not that expensive. But the reality is during that time it was. Because of the pricing of gas, this could not have come at a better time. But it competed with some very interesting cars, which you still see today, such as the Kia Soul, the Nissan Leaf, as well as the Nissan Versa, for all intents and purposes. And it was supposed to be green. It was supposed to be Honda's way of not necessarily making a boring hybrid. Now, this was comparatively a sister car to the Insight, and it was uniquely styled, and a lot of people who had them enjoyed them. Now, it only sold 35,000 units. Not surprising. And so for the first year, it sold roughly about 5,400, and then the next year it would hit a peak of roughly 11,000 units. Now, the marketing wasn't that great behind this car. There was some level of hype. It was one of those cars that if you knew, you knew. And a lot of car enthusiasts were pining the website to decide if they were going to buy it. In terms of price, it wasn't that bad. You could get one roughly at base for $19,000, and you could get one top tier EX with navigation for about $23,000. The problem that came in is that if you decided you wanted one, then you would probably have to choose between the CRZ and the Insight. And I'm gonna be honest, the kicker between the CRZ and the Insight is the back seat. Now, between the US market and the European and Japanese market, the big difference between the US market and the Japanese and European market versions of this car was that it came with the back seat. For the other markets, we didn't get one, but he was still charging me American prices. How does that work? And so because of that, I believe that is one of the failing components of this entire recipe, and it made it that much harder for people to justify getting a $23,000 two-seater, whereas you could get something comparable like a Miata, or you could get something like a Nissan Leaf or a Versa or something like that for a relatively affordable price. And that is kind of the Achilles heel of this. Around 2014 is where Honda Performance Development introduced the supercharged version of this car, but it couldn't save it. Now, it got the power up from 122 to 197, but you had to pay an additional fee to get this installed. And so, of course, many people just weren't that interested. And towards 2016 is finally when it would be discontinued, getting into the bigger question of why the CRZ failed. Now, we can argue whether or not it failed or was bad timing. I'm going to say it's a bit of both. Objectively, it failed. Let's call a spade a spade. It did not meet Honda's sales expectations, but it was a niche vehicle, so the bar should have been a little bit lower. I'm just not gonna hold y'all. There are other cars out there that comparatively on paper would have aligned with this car and have been more successful. The Nissan Leaf and the Honda Civic Hybrid, especially with the new version that's out, are much better and still have the same fun driving dynamics that this one had. Now, granted, this was a bit experimental as this car was discontinued to open the door for the FCX Clarity as well as the Honda Accord Hybrid, which I'm gonna be honest with you, I think that's why we can blame the Honda Accord Hybrid for being whack. I believe the CRZ is why we have the Honda Accord Hybrid that we have today, because it opened the door for those two cars. But to be fair and to be frank, this car was very niche, and the styling of it minus the back seat is really what led to its demise. I ain't gonna hold y'all. I'm gonna stand on business. The missing of the back seat, why the f you took my back seat? Don't ask me why. And the value proposition behind the CRZ wasn't that great. I mean, $23,000 for a two-seater that's not rear-wheel drive, very hard to justify. And so that ultimately led to its demise. In addition, it also made it that much harder for a lot of Honda enthusiasts to keep buying the same car because it only went through one generation. So it is truly the most unique of all of its cars next to the ZDX, not the new the old one. The new one is General Motors based. That's not a Honda. Nope, not a Honda. If I'm being honest, it's a bit unfair on the CRZ because the CRZ was a bit of bad timing as well. We need something like that today. We need a car that is fun, cheap to maintain, but fun and practical and affordable, but not exactly something that you would see that everybody else has. You can say we still have the Civic. You can say we still have other cars, but Honda doesn't make cars like that. And the styling was very Japanese as it was built in Japan. So it also makes sense of why it looked the way that it did. But in terms of where it would stand today, it would probably do significantly better today considering the climate of hybrids and electrification. Given that this was a hybrid manual, I believe that in today's world, a lot of us would have actually purchased it. And at the end of the day, value proposition and price drive sales. If nobody is buying it, it's probably because they don't want it or they can't. I learned that the other day. I'm so excited. Because of this is what led to the demise of the CRZ. And this is also why many of them are almost relics of what Honda was trying to do in an otherwise world where enthusiasm for cars has been lost. But you guys leave me a comment below and let me know what you think about the CRZ. If you've ever driven one, if you've ever owned one, and if you think that it should have sold better than what it did, because quite frankly, I don't think it could have done any better than it did. And with that being said, until the next video, I will see you guys later.